welcome everyone. So excited. We haven't had a guest on the show for so long. It's been way too long. People have been hounding me to get more people on. And honestly, I remember last time we had CCP Psych on here I think last year sometime, and then I wanted to have Mark on. Honestly, when we were in Iceland, Luke, and for the summit, but. For some reason, that didn't come along. He wanted to come on and defend Blue Loot for some reason, and then somehow I think he lost his courage, and then he joined CCP. So that's
right.
that's how that goes. So anyway, Luke, thanks for stopping by today. You guys have to understand. I see Luke a lot, and I see Luke's office there also a lot, and his snake in the background because we meet for weekly CSM meetings. So it's not unusual to me. But Luke, can you introduce yourself? I think most people that are into the NullSec politics, they know who you are, but there's at least half the people in here that might not have any idea who you are. So can you introduce yourself and tell us what you do in game?
So I'm Luke Anninan. Obviously, as the Oz has already said, I'm on the CSM, largely representing Fraternity, of which I am a co-executor of the Alliance. Largely focusing on the whole time zone that's not Chinese speaking, which is still larger than a lot of people realise. But I also do look after a lot of the Chinese player base.
Yeah, and Fraternity overall, I think it's known to everyone basically as the Chinese Alliance, right? How would you say how is the split if you say like China versus non-China?
So it's about, last time I checked, it's about 70-30. So there are 36,000 characters in Fraternity. Last time I checked, might be a little bit higher now. And about 10,000 of those were not Chinese-speaking corporations.
All right.
Now, that doesn't mean they're strictly, English-speaking corporations. We have Chinese, Japanese, South Korean, German, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese. Obviously, a lot of Americans, a lot of Brits, French. There's a lot of different languages and time zones covered in Fraternity, even though Chinese time zone is the one that most people know it for.
Right. And so Fraternity overall, it's the third. Is it the third biggest alliance in game? Is that right?
Just bringing it up now. I think last time I checked, it was third. I think it's Goon Swarm, Pandemic Horde, and then Fraternity.
Yeah, and they keep switching 1 and 2, but then But in terms of number of systems owned, I think you're very large, right?
So Fraternity itself has 175, and I'm sure, no doubt, we will have a conversation later on. Our kind of renter alliance has 131.
All right.
I'm sure that's a conversation that we'll come up to later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure people are interested to hear, in terms of a large alliance, leading a large alliance, does that mean you spend, I don't know, 90% of your time managing spreadsheets and discords and doing politics, or do you occasionally log on and fly spaceships?
I do occasionally log on and fly spaceships. Not as much as I'd like to. I kind of felt like I was really busy, and then I also did the CSM thing, which meant my eve time kind of got split even more. Spreadsheet wise, we can talk about this later on when we talk about things like the industrial side of everything and kind of how that works. But generally, there are people that are far better than I am that kind of look after a lot of the industrial stuff, and we can talk about how that works. But there's a lot of Discord, whether that's planning ops, talk to FCs, kind of make sure everyone's happy, but also spending a lot of time just sitting on Mumble. One of the things I do, like, we use Mumble for our voice comms as an alliance. And one of the things I will tend to do is just pop my headset on, drop into standing fleet, and just chat and talk to the members if I can. Like, if it's a trade-off between spending half an hour on a fleet or half an hour just chatting, like chewing the fat with members, I'll choose chewing the fat any day, because it's the community aspect of what you're trying to build, right?
Yeah. And in terms of CSM, so it's your second year as CSM, right? So you're one of the incumbents that came in. So you knew what to expect, but overall, in terms of time and energy that it is required, was it when you joined in? Was it more than you expected, or was it about as much as you expected?
I think I expected you've got the weekly stuff, right? And I think you kind of always expect that sort of similar sort of cadence in most kind of organizations. You're gonna have like a weekly kind of catch up, and I think that kind of made sense. I think the bit of time that was probably more than I slightly expected is kind of all the conversations that center around outside of the conversations with CSM, whether that's conversations with CSM members, whether it's conversations with kind of line members, and also finding yourself kind of going over the same topic, 1,000 times over the course of a month. Like when something big happens in game, you find yourself going over the same topic with different audiences multiple times. It's yeah. What about yourself? How have you found it?
I think it's in the beginning when I heard some estimates of oh, this is going to take 15 to 20 hours a week, et cetera, et cetera. I was I was certainly shocked about that number, and it hasn't turned out to be that. What I have to say though is that just like you, I mean I have a day job and a family and stuff, and so it's for me it's definitely eaten into my game time. That was before I had very structured game time in the week, and I was doing my trading and my streaming, etc., etc. So for me, it just meant that I had to cut in half again. And nevertheless, it's been such an incredibly awesome experience to be on the CSM, just because I love this game, and to be part of that exchange with you and all the other guys and girls. Awesome. Really, really
It's
good.
really interesting, especially when you get the chance to kind of talk as a group of CSM members from very different gameplay styles, be it low sec PvP, be it the kind of big null sec kind of block sort of thing, and you kind of have those conversations and start thinking about the other styles of gameplay that exist that you just didn't really ever consider, because you kind of fall into your niche. Right? Like I fell into null sec probably week 2 of Eve. I guess you probably fell into the kind of market stuff fairly soon as well, and so you kind of tunnel vision.
Absolutely. I mean, for almost 15 years, I played the game exclusively in the market. I never really undocked for much of anything at all. Nowadays, I do it just because I force myself to try other things, and I've tried almost everything by now. But I didn't really have to do that. Bidley, thank you for the reset. Hey, there's a good question in chat actually. Before I get to the questions that people send in, because Luke, I did an announcement 2 days ago that you were coming on the show, and I asked people to submit questions, and I have never ever had this many questions being submitted.
So I have to confess, I wasn't in your Discord until you said you'd
I
asked.
saw that.
I looked at the list. I'm like, okay, this is. I don't
Yeah.
know why. I don't know why I wasn't in your Discord. I kind of, because I use Discord for Eve stuff and I use Discord for a load of other community things. I'm quite brutal at pruning my Discord.
You have to be. You have to
And
be.
a lot of
Yeah.
the streamer ones kind of get knocked off on it, right? It's like I'll get a notification on Twitch when they go live. Great, I'll go watch them.
I think what most people, like the mass of the people that are on my server, what they use it for is nowadays the marketplace, because like buying and selling stuff in a neutral place outside of your alliance, that's one of the few I think added bonuses you get, because I think people socialize in their own alliance and corps and everything, and then there's just the hardcore that socialize on ours. But there's a good question here, and that is, I'd like to know why someone would transition to the management style gameplay over the space stuff. I think it's a great question.
It's a really interesting question, and there's probably 2 sides to the answer. In terms of how I ended up transitioning to the management side of things, it was largely by need. So I've been in fraternity since 2018, I want to say. So just before the second war, kind of with tests kind of kicked off in Teterid and kind of all that side of space. And at the back end of the war, we lost. I think that's quite well known. We moved north. And obviously, the losing side of a war loses a lot of corps, a lot of members, right? Like, nobody wants to be on the losing side. And a huge part of Fraternity kind of broke apart during that process. And ultimately, I kind of jumped into the position to help steady the ship because the community I was part of needed the ship steadying, and that's kind of how I ended up in it. It was kind of almost like wrong time, wrong place. I offered to help and try and steady something, and then a month later I was a director, and then 2 months later I was an executive. Right? It was it was kind of a bit surreal at the time. In terms of like why I enjoyed that kind of gameplay, I like creating environments and communities that other people can sit and enjoy and kind of like create their stories. So a good example, the fight in FWST that everyone knows about, the record breaking fight. Well, as that Keepstar was a Fraternity Keepstar, I was part of the 2-person team that moved the freighters, that put it there, got it into space. It took about a week's worth of planning to get it there, and that was both of them. And you get to kind of sit there at the end, and when it died, but I got to trigger an event because of the position I'm in. I have the ability to trigger these events that cause these, 6,000 people fight that everybody kind of goes on and talks about, and you don't get to create those stories unless you're willing to kind of put that other slight effort above just flying around. It's just an amazing feeling that you can't replicate.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same about ISK making. I used to just trade to see the number go up, and about I think a year and a half ago, we started doing the Oz tank, so our Eve version of the Shark tank, right? And giving away the money and seeing other people doing stuff with the money that you give them is awesome. I just love it. So it's making stuff happen in space by the things that you've created. It's the best feeling overall.
Yeah, it's just a really different feeling, and there's not. Yeah, it's really hard to describe if you're not in that position.
Yeah.
You know.
So let's move into some of the questions that came in, and I'm going to start with some of the ones that I'm seeing more than once. Not unsurprisingly, a little bit of industry and markets focused from our community, but in terms of Fraternity, right? You're in a NullSec alliance. You have massive access to resources. The monthly economic report would make me believe that you're very, very active both on the mining side and on the Rting side as an alliance. Outside of that, how much do you rely on HiSec? Like is it that you have all your own resources, you don't need anything from HiSec, or are there shortages that you need to cover with HiSec or other reasons?
I mean, there's always shortage. So first of all, one of the things that we try and put a lot of time into is kind of diversification of gameplay. Now, whether that's just because of resources or whether that's income, for us, we have huge pages of guides to kind of go, NullSec's great for this, but if you want to go and make some hits, here's some guides for mission running and low sec, or mission running and high sec if you're a newer player, or Poshven, right? Like, I'm sure someone will comment somewhere around how in certain time zones just flying around in Marauders all day long or Vargas all day long. So we're generally fairly self-sustainable. Obviously, there are some resources that are just easier to get in quantities, and some we'll have certain people that mine it there in terms of resource. We also have a lot of arrangements with corps and other alliances that live in high sec to just buy in materials if we kind of need them. Because getting a lot of people to leave their NullSec bubble can sometimes be surprisingly difficult. Like, they don't want to leave NullSec. Like, I mean, a NullSec alliance, why do they want to go to high sec? So we kind of have a combination of like various trade relationships with different entities that live in high sec or low sec to kind of provide that additional material.
And in terms of like in terms of income sources, so I saw that question a lot in terms of, as a Null alliance, you need a lot of SRP, you need to drop a lot of structures, you need to replace a lot of things that are lost. What do you fund it through taxes? Do you is it so that are the big operations nationalized? Is it a top down order, who goes mining where, or how does that work?
No, so I'll try and kind of step through it. So obviously there's a level of income that is generated through the whole renting thing. We can talk about renting and the morals and ethics of renting in a video game at some point later on in the stream. Um, from a tax perspective, we do, like most null groups, and I assume probably the most high sec and low sec groups, we do tax our corps. It's not a particularly high tax. It's quite public. I think it's 5% effectively. Um, in terms of,
Yeah.
and that doesn't include ice mining. We don't tax ice mining. We don't tax anything like belt sort of stuff. Then refining, we have our own refineries, so all the refineries are under the alliance. So that generates a little bit of income.
Okay.
Poco's is nothing. I think our Poco tax is 0.2%. We don't even bother taxing Pocos.
Why is that?
Honestly, despite the general opinion, we try to avoid clawing as much money out of our members. We'll try and generate the ISK we need to do what we need to do, and if we don't need it, we don't need it. And Poco's was one that we've deemed that we've not really ever needed to increase. And there's no for us that like having ISK. We don't want ISK for the sake of wanting ISK, right? You accumulate ISK to put down structures or create ships or blueprints to give to your members to go and smash into somebody else and have fun. So our calculation is very much predicated around how much ISK do we actually need to do what we need to do, basically. And maybe put a little bit away for a rainy day when there's a big war, obviously. But
right. For an alliance like Fraternity, if I said, here's 1 trillion ISK, is that a drop in the bucket, or is that significant?
I mean, 1 trillion ISK is never inconsequential to anyone, right? It's, I mean, it's not going to like change everything we did overnight, right? What having a spare trillion ISK might do is go, oh, actually, let's go and take this fight in some really blingy stuff that we just hand out, and if it dies, great, fine, move on, right? It's not uncommon for us to look at certain fights and go, we just want to fight. We've got the ISK. Let's just have the fight. We'll deal with the SRP later, basically. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Do most of your members, when you look at what they're doing, because you've got to, I'm sure you have all the archetypes in your alliance as well, like you do have all over Eve. Do you do you typically feel like, oh, I wish some of these people would stop mining and ratting so much and join more PvP, or is it the other way around where you're like, we really need more people to do mining and ratting?
I think the truth is, I will always take more PvPers. We have a lot of people that rat. We have a lot of people that mine, especially when you amplify that with ults, right? There's lots of mining ults and lots of PvE ults that you're never going to use in a PvP context, unless you have a very specific doctrine that allows for a kind of a lower skill pilot or a very specific skill pilot. Now we when we kind of form fleets, we have kind of a number of different tiers of like priority, like most null set groups do, right? Ranging from like, this is a social fleet, it's a roam, we don't care, through to, a skirmish, which is, if you're around and you can get on, join, through to a strat, which is, we'd really like you to join, and then all the way through to kind of like, a red pen CTA, which is like, Veil is burning. If you, like kiss your dog and get on the fleet sort of thing, right? but to be clear on the kind of monopolizing thing, in the last 4 years, that red pen CTA has never been called, ever. Because and nobody ever calls it, and nobody can call it without like a level of permission to do so, because we don't want to just go, you're chained to your desk to play this video game. It's meant to be a video game, it's meant to be fun. And if you want to rat all day and accumulate ISK through ratting, or accumulate ISK from mining, and that's your gameplay, that's your gameplay, and that's what you're here to enjoy doing, just come and help when we need you. But we'll try and avoid asking for that as much as possible.
And in terms of those CTAs, the pings that go out, do you see a clear difference between your Chinese player base and your non-Chinese player base?
It's a good question. Yes, I think the biggest difference is more kind of culture around playtime. A lot of Chinese speaking players, one, they tend to work longer hours, they tend to work more days a week. If they're kind of working age or versus like kind of university age, they tend to kind of quieten down a lot earlier into the evening than, let's say, Europeans would do, right? So I know for me at the moment it's 9:30. I know for you it's 10:30, and I'll log in and I'll find generally, unless there's a big reason for a lot of the Chinese player base, will start to ramp off a little bit earlier in the evening.
Okay, but in terms of numbers, you don't know. Oh, they're definitely going to show up more than everyone else, or are they more loyal, more more reliable?
I don't think it's necessarily that. I mean, it's really hard to gauge if they're more reliable, because if you do like one ping, you might get 100 Chinese speaking. If you do one ping, you might get 50 initially in like the first 5 minutes on the non-Chinese speaking, right? But then you have to also acknowledge the Chinese speaking is 2 to 3 times the size. So just the sheer pool of people that can turn up in those fleets is greater, right?
But is your structure do you have like kind of like a dual structure? Because I mean, I imagine you need to have different language fleets, but in terms of Discord, like, do you have a central Discord that is in one language, or how does it work?
No, so there are effectively 2 Discords, 2 Mumbles. And that's largely from a language perspective. There's one Discord that's got some is English and Chinese, and there's one that's English and then every other language you speak, German, Spanish, so on and so forth. And likewise, there are 2 Mumbles. Now, the mumble thing is a bit of a technical reason that it exists, because if you have one diaspora players that are largely Southeast Asian timed, right? So Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, Burma, Singapore kind of area, and then you have your European kind of players in the UK and France and Germany and America. Just the sheer latency to get both sides of the world onto a single mumble server and be able to hold like a conversation, it just doesn't work. There are technical ways of doing it, but they are, thousands and thousands of pounds kind of style investments, sort of things you have in like big corporate and kind of like real-time trading kind of platforms in order to get that level of speed.
Yeah.
That's kind of part of the other reason why it's split. It's just a logistical and technical headache to have someone from Hong Kong on the same mumble as someone from the UK in a conversation doesn't have a ping of 600.
Let's move on to some larger questions. All right. One of these, I know you've already seen this question because we talked about it earlier, but I didn't hear you answer yet. What do you currently perceive as the biggest problem in EVE right now, and what would your solution be?
Biggest problem in EVE. So it's not all of EVE, or we're just talking NullSec here?
You can however you want to answer it. From a NullSec perspective.
That's a good question. For me, it is stagnation. I think, and I know, Oz, we have these conversations quite a lot, right? And I know you definitely hear it from other old CSM members, right? It is the stagnation. Is mentioned in chat that there's very few things to fight over, and even when those fights do happen, the size of the propensity to kind of go up the bat phone kind of ladder just means those fights, at least on a null perspective, either everybody commits and it's a really big fight, or 9 times out of 10 everybody stands at the other side of a gate staring each other off, but neither side wants to really jump in because they haven't got like the definitive advantage. I think for me, that's from a very specific nullsec focus. That's the big issue I see. I think the other challenge, there is one more, it's kind of a Plex related thing, and we were talking about this before, is it feels like the player base of EVE is kind of contracted. So it feels like a lot more alts, a lot less real people, which means, we were talking about this earlier about like, just like the prices of Plex, but it's because there's far fewer people buying these commodities. They are spending real money, but they're just not getting injected into the market, which continuously pushes the price, right? Like I can't remember the last time I saw Plex drop substantially. I mean, you watch this sort of stuff, so you might go, actually,
and I mean, not in the last few years, it hasn't.
No, and I think that's another problem, and they're two very different problems, right? One is player acquisition and retention sort of thing, and those people that then want to spend money into the game versus the mechanics of the game.
When the main use for Plex is subscription time, and you raise the subscription price significantly, then that's going to put upward pressure on Plex, and so that's what we are seeing. I think they've upped the number. CCP has upped the number of sales quite a bit, and that's so we have temporary relief every here and that now and then. But then we have massive sales in the new Eden store where you have to have Plex for, and that drives the price right back up. So even right now, the Plex price right now is from a high level. It's currently trading 10% above 52-week average. So I mean, it's expensive.
Yeah.
So in terms of related to that, you mentioned 9 times out of 10 you might be just staring at each other through a gate. The capital prices probably have something to do with that. We are seeing at least for super capitals very, very high prices compared to what they used to be. I'll spare the whole discussion about scarcity. But what's your take on that? Do you think super capitals are too expensive? Are you too afraid to lose them as an alliance because you can't replace them, which is what I hear from nullsec alliances?
I mean, listen, we as an alliance try to avoid kind of like saying do not use your super for this, right? Like it's their own toy, they bought it, they spent their own risk on it. That's how we ended up losing a Komodo on a gate, because he decided to warp it down to shoot a TFI and then get dread bombed by Snuff, right? But we try to avoid telling pilots not to use the ships. Now, in terms of kind of in anger, so kind of moving a fleet and having a fight with a commensurate size fleet, I think there is some truth there that it's your to use kind of like a real world analogous military term, right? It's your strategic deterrent. If you take your super fleet out and it loses, everybody knows you haven't got a super fleet, which means you don't have that last deterrent to go, well, if you want to take the space, this is what you've got to face. With the prices pushed so high, nobody's going to take them out in the fight. Now, at the same time, even when prices were low, you didn't see big super fights like every day, right? Like I'm not 100% sure that making supers cheaper would mean there were more super fights in the game. There would definitely be more nano supers flying around doing stupid things, but I'm not sure it would directly increase the number of big super battles because they didn't necessarily happen before. So
yeah, I mean, you're talking about SRP earlier. Is SRP is that your main expenditure as an alliance?
Depends if it's been a good month or a bad month. If it's been a bad month, then yes, or a good month, depending on how you look at it. No, I would suspect the majority expenditure of our income is actually kind of infrastructure costs and fueling costs and kind of structure related stuff.
So it actually
SRP would be a close second, right?
Yes, and during wartime, obviously that goes up significantly, or can go up significantly.
Yeah, it can really ramp up, but that's all about that's the pre-planning stuff, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That's if there's a big war coming out, that's when you start looking at things and kind of going, okay, I'm going to get ready for this, and build up and everything ready to go, sort of stuff.
Somebody asked your thoughts on the current state of power projection in the game, and that's probably the number one, maybe one of the biggest topics we've been talking about in the CSM this year. What I've heard your stance, but what for everyone out there, what do you think about it, and maybe also what do you think about it as an alliance?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that there is too much projection at the moment. It's too easy, and there are too many options, right? Which just kind of compounds the problem, right? Between Zarzak, which is fairly consistent, jump bridges, which is fairly consistent as long as no one's interdicted it, through to kind of like wormholes, which are at least a little bit more random. So I think there is too much. I think the challenge with power projection is how do you curve power projection without making it a complete drudgery for the individual users that have got to use those things, right? So, you know, a good example of that is, you know, and you see it on Reddit all the time, oh, we should have fatigue in antiplexes. Well, I was like, well, that's great until you realize that nobody's going to do anything in their home region anymore because just moving around to Rat is creating this level of fatigue that's just not enjoyable for the pilot. So my personal view, and I've said it quite a lot, is I think there should be some form of power projection restriction in the game. I don't think it starts from home though. I think you have to have a bit of a like, here is my sphere of influence, and then it starts to ramp up beyond that. So you're not penalising absolutely everybody for the point of convenience, because you know, if you talk about jump bridges, you know, to maintain jump bridges, you've still got to have a team of fuelers. You've got to conquer the space. You've got to build the components. Like, a lot of effort's still gone into constructing those systems. So if you make them too problematic, then why? Well, you know, what's the next benefit for being in null, right? And holding an alliance in null versus just living in low sec.
But you feel like in the current state, do you feel like the large alliances can go everywhere too quickly?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%, right? So currently, if I wanted to go to GTAC, I'm in Curse, right? I can take a time bridge before H. I can go into Vino. I can fly through Zarzak, and as long as I don't get interdicted in Zarzak, I'm now in Curse. That's, you know, what's that geographic? It's 55 light years. I think the entire New Eden map is about 100 light years, and you're kind of just going right from the top right to the middle. That feels somewhat extreme, especially as there's no, you know, it's very predictable. That gate is there. You can jump through it. I think on numerous streams over the last year or so, I think my opinion on Zarzak is really well documented. I think it's a terrible thing, even though we use it to go and take nightmares down to Curse, right? Like, it's kind of taking nightmares down to Curse is always also almost a bit of a meme at this point to prove the point that there is a problem with this system.
Yeah. And at least one thing we can say is that we've talked to CCP about this. That's all we can say, though. In terms of somebody's asking the pros and cons of being in jump range of Forge or Caldari low sec. Does that make a difference?
It does. So this is a really interesting thing. So when we finished the war, we went and lived in Oasa. So the story behind that is there was a group called Skill U. Most people know Skill U. I don't know, Oz, if you've run into them from a trading perspective, but they had a whole load of rental space up in Oasa and Peregrine Falls and Out of Passage, if I remember correctly. Now during the war, when they folded as an alliance and decided they'd had enough of this game, a fair chunk of them joined Fraternity. And actually, they ceded the space to us. So as the war kind of started to get to a point where we were losing our ground, all of a sudden there's this block of space that's kind of opened up, and it's like, oh great, right. At least it means we haven't now got to move all these people to God knows where. So we kind of moved up there and we kind of rebuilt up there. The problem is it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. There's very little to no roaming content, right? Excluding wormholes. And from an alliance perspective, we took the decision of we wanted to make sure our pilots were on the front line and had to fight and defend the space they were in, rather than kind of, you know, sit there in the back end of nowhere and get fat, and then when war comes, go, oh, we've not had to fight for the last 2 years. We don't know what to do now, right? So there was definitely a conscious decision to move there.
Okay.
Also, you know, it's super useful to be in range of Jita. So, you know, our industrialists, we will buy certain things from Jita if we have a bit of a deficiency of it. Also, a lot of our guys will export certain things to Jita. We have some rules around what should and shouldn't be exported, but it gives them a lot more access to these sort of things. And, you know, obviously Postran is now a thing, which it wasn't at the time, but that's super cool. There's something else that's reasonably close to get to from the space. And obviously we've got lots of pilots now that take part in, you know, low sec incursions, high sec incursions, the faction warfare stuff, since that had the revamp since we moved, and it's a lot easier to get to. So for us it was, yeah, there's big risk, right? You're in dread bomb range and you have to fight for your space, but the benefits far outweighed the risk of being super cautious about it.
In terms of what your members do and don't do, do you feel like, is there something you do differently compared to the other large alliances? Like what would you say is your unique thing? If you're talking also, I mean, you know, a lot of people are listening, if you're recruiting, like what do you tell people? Hey, this is what makes us special, this is why you need to join Fraternity.
That's an interesting question. I mean, ignoring the kind of, you know, the Chinese part, which I'm sure is the bit that will come up in chat somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think most large alliances are fairly similar in terms of their, at least they believe they're similar in terms of like. So I tend to have a view of, this is a video game. This is about having fun. If you're not having fun, we'll go find something fun to do. And not monopolize time on fleets or like mining fleets or CTAs and all the rest of it. Now, that's not me saying all of these other alliances don't do that. I've not, you know, to be honest, the last 5 years plus I've been in Fraternity, right? So my perspective of other alliances is almost non-existent at this point now, other than what you kind of pick up on channels like Reddit and Twitch
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. But for us, there's very much, you know, this is a video game. Let's have fun. If it's having fun, whelping 500 billion or a trillion ISK, we'll give you the ISK. Let's just go and do it. Let's go have fun. Don't care, right? Like that's kind of our big thing. You know, I could say things like we're a friendly community, but I think everyone would say the same thing, and I think that's probably largely true across the board, right?
I
That's a
think
little bit of a
all
answer, but
alliances have the good and the bad apples, I think.
yeah, and we you know, one of the least interesting things about alliance leadership is dealing with the, you know,
Yeah.
drama that can occur, sort of thing.
Do you feel like Sinophobia, if that's the right word in English, is
Yeah.
still a thing? Is it a problem, do you think, on tranquility, I should say?
Yes. In a short answer, yes. I think the truth is somewhat slightly more complicated. Um, because I mean, I go down the assumptions: do you think people go out to be racist? And I kind of make the default assumption: no, most people are fairly normal, everyday people, and they don't. I think one of the historic challenges is uh, the generally Chinese speaking player base in most MMOs have historically always had a bad rap. Sometimes that is for, you know, completely legitimate reasons. I'm not going to debate some of the you know, the
Mm-hmm.
evidence and the statistics on things like that. Um, I think the I think the challenge is when you say people act like this because they are Chinese, and it's like that's not the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
The actual answer is people act in a certain way because of the culture and the community they were brought up in, whether that's, you know, things in China, whether that's things in Russia, whether that's things in Germany. If you kind of talk about like, you know, the
Yeah.
way people would have acted pre the fall of the Berlin Wall in China, right? In just sorry, Germany would be very
Yeah.
different to how people act now. And that's kind of a cultural thing rather than, you know, because they're Chinese or because they're XY. So there is definitely some of it. And, you know, people like to hide behind a keyboard on Reddit and nobody's ever going to call them out behind a keyboard on Reddit. So there's definitely some of it, but I think the truth is it's a lot more complex.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure. I mean, there's Eve brings out the best and worst in people, and I think we've all seen it in the community. So I certainly agree. I think I see more. I think more prejudice than necessary with, especially when people talk about fraternity. But you know, you're right. There are, if we're talking about things like botting, farming in an excessive way. Yeah.
Talking about botting, can I reply to the
Yeah.
question around the fraternity rules,
Please.
right? Because I actually have a really hard line on this, and I think also
Yeah.
you've probably witnessed this in conversation already, right? So first of all, you know, ultimate arbitrage does have to fall on CCP, right? They have the data, we don't have the data, right? So there is an element of it is very hard to police certain things or prove it unequivocally, and that is CCP's job. However, I and other members of fraternity are on record say, one, we do not support botting. Two, we have your ESI. And three, if we suspect something, I will personally hand your data to the CCP security team to investigate you. That is my line on it. We will remove you and we will hand your data to CCP to investigate. I do not support botting. And generally speaking, most of the alliance, you know, everywhere has bad eggs and we will root them out, do not support botting. that is, and maybe I think hopefully that's clear enough.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think I've talked to you enough over the last 6 months or so to to absolutely say that I believe you wholeheartedly. I mean, I think it's impossible overall to control 100% of what your alliance is doing. There's no way, and I think it's important to have stances, and it's important to follow it up, and everything else is going to it's going to be what it's going to be. One of the big things that kept coming up when I said you were coming was time zone tamping. Time zone camping. Luke.
Yeah.
Fraternity is here. All they do is time zone tank, and they basically are unassailable because they rule their time zone. Tell us, what do you think about time zone tanking, and is it really an unfair advantage?
I mean, that's where it's an unfair advantage is a tricky question, right? So first of all, the question is do you define time zone tanking, or collectively, do we define time zone tanking as setting stuff in a time zone so that you don't have to take a fight and you just win? Now that's the old GOTG kind of Sword Dragon model, right? Like everyone knows, Sword Dragon was on record saying he was the best time zone tanker in the game, and everything was set to AU time zone, right? That's kind of one side. The second side is it just that your members are in that time zone? And that is when they play. So why would they ever set a vulnerability window outside of their time zone?
Yep.
That's not tanking. That's effectively, if you define that as tanking, then you have to define, Goon Swarm with their time zone, or their time zone tanking against Fraternity, because most of their members are in GMT +8, and that's a very complicated subject. Now, do our allies at times move things into the time zone where we can defend them? Yes, because in war it's strategically logical to move things into the time zone where you can defend. That's the same reason why, a couple of months ago, when the whole thing in Curse and kind of Catch warmed up, that was all because Fraternity was shooting Jakaras because they're both in GMT +8. It's a good time zone matchup. And then eventually Jakara swapped all their stuff over to match the Goon Swarm main time zone, right? That's time zone tanking, Now, can you do anything about it? I think is the bigger question. Now, the slight challenge with the Fraternity perspective, and I appreciate that it's true, is in GMT +8, its size is just so massive. There's nobody else that can really compete in that time zone without alarm clocking, and so I can understand why that could cause frustration. You've got the likes of Jakaras, but Jakaras, I haven't checked their size. I think they're 10,000 characters. When you compare that to them 36, it's like, well, it's not a fair matchup, and it's never going to happen. What could something be changed with it? Yes, I think it could be, and I think there should be ways of manipulating the time zone window to be longer, right? So everybody gets to kind of overlap with everybody else a little bit more. You might have to put some effort in to do it. Should you get rid of it? I think that's a very double-edged sword, right? Because if you get rid of time zone kind of windows, I guarantee the next question will be, at 5 o'clock in the morning my time, there's 3,000 Chinese time zone characters reinforcing all of our stuff and hitting this stuff because there's no time zone protection on it. This is unfair. I think ultimately you can't in a global game, it's really hard to get rid of that, right? Like, just how do you deal with it?
Absolutely. I think within the rules that we currently have on Tranquility, I think there's like, you can't expect anyone to not take advantage of it, except for if there is no fights happening at all, and all fights, because I think if no fights are happening overall, then that's bad for everyone, right? So if you're consistently avoiding all fights and trying to simply grind your opponent down, then you might win a war, but I don't want to say that's not how you win the hearts, but that's also not how you win the game, in my view.
Eve, as a game, and this is part of the long-lived nature of how long it takes to build up and learn your skills and build up your kind of your assets and all the rest of it, is a game that has traditionally been pretty brutal, right? Like, if you lose, you really lose. So in a game that's designed to be that kind of harsh dystopian universe, you got to believe everybody's going to use every trick they can get to get that upper hand and that edge, right? That's the construct. That's the sandbox, right?
And then you can't really complain of other people being in other time zones and setting their structures to their time zone. I mean, that's something that you cannot complain about. I do feel that you can complain about fight avoidance overall, but let's I think
the scarcity thing, right? Though, if ships were more abundant and minerals were more abundant, people would care less about it and they'd have more fights. It's quite cyclical.
I don't know. We have a NullSec expansion coming up, Luke. We can't talk about it, but we maybe at least some things are changing. Renting is another thing you mentioned earlier. Hotly contested, wars being fought over as well. What's your alliance's stance on renting? How do you guys handle it?
I'll give my stance and then I'll give my alliance's stance because they entirely match with each other, right? So I am on record, including amongst all my own executors and everything else. I don't like renting. Now, there's a catch. As an executor, I have to make sure that there are routes in place to generate the level of ISK that is required to run the alliance and provide members with the things they want. And as it currently stands, renting is the logical approach to that. Would I like to see it change? Yes. Would I like to see different ways of making ISK? Yes. Currently, that is unfortunately the logical approach to it. And it's not an ideological argument. It's a pure mathematical and economics argument.
Yeah. I'm not surprised at all. And honestly, I mean, as a more or less neutral onlooker from the outside, I think the anti-renting argument of the last war was largely propaganda and doesn't really make any economic sense. But we need brisk yelling this stuff around, otherwise it gets boring. So sure, I think there's no way to avoid renting in the way that it's currently set up. But it's I agree with you that ideally there wouldn't be any need to, because everything would be manageable and interesting and with enough income that wouldn't be necessary. But hey, let's talk a little bit about maybe recruiting, since not everyone in here is in my community at least is a NullSec, right? You have a lot of people in HighSec that have maybe never tried NullSec, and you said earlier what's maybe unique about Fraternity, but what's like a typical way into the alliance? Like, do you have specific recruiting corps? Do you have recruiters out there that are spamming messages in JITA? How does that work?
There are definitely, there are definitely corps out there that are very, very, very active on the new bro kind of recruitment sort of side, and that will, as much as I actually kind of don't like it, require to end up with spamming in JITA or like new player kind of systems and the kind of spam email sort of thing. Generally speaking, a lot of new players, they just kind of find their corps, right? There are some corps that are really good at kind of bringing up new players, and if they find their way there, then they kind of build up in the alliance and all the rest of it sort of thing. We do have, just like again a number of alliances, we do have kind of like a new player doctrine, so new players can kind of get straight in with their low skill characters. They kind of feel like they're part of the fight and they're kind of part of the bigger effort, as well as a system of kind of going, you want to understand how to be a logic pilot, great, we do logic classes, links classes, scanning classes, how to be an FC sort of thing. That's our normal approach. Are we the the biggest new bro kind of focused alliance in the game? Almost certainly not, right? You've got the likes of Brave, you've got the likes of PH that that's their thing, and they've kind of got that edge there. We do have some corps that deal with it. I have been asked to ask you a question, which
please.
is Oz croissantship when. I think what they're asking is Oz Azerial when.
Yeah, need to. I need to scale up my NullSec indie game for sure. I have definitely lately. So I don't know if you know, but I'm currently in a NullSec alliance, Luke. I have. Yeah, I'm on an adventure. I'm going undercover to learn the way of NullSec, and it's been a lot of fun. But certainly, industry in NullSec is one of the things that I'm getting into most in this coming year.
How are you?
And
How are
the
you?
croissant ship is next on my list.
How are you finding that adventure? You said yourself, obviously, you spend a lot of your time in high tech trading. How are you? How are you finding
Yeah,
it?
because I joined the CSM and I basically I'm not allowing myself to trade just because we know too much. And it's too dangerous for me to break an NDA when I'm just handling 4 trillion ISK and JITA. And so what I'm doing is just I joined a wormhole corp for a few months, and then now I've moved into NullSec. And while I don't have enough time to join the fleet every day and do all of that, it's very, very interesting to learn the structures, to look at the various groups in NullSec, to see how industry is organized, how resource management is done. From my perspective as a trader, super interesting. And definitely, I don't know if I'm ever going back to high sec after my CSM term is inevitably over at some point. But loving it really. I mean, NullSec is really in terms of large organizations and really feeling what power is in EVE Online. I think NullSec is the place to be, right? Because in wormhole space feels very much like the Wild West, smaller groups, great fights, etc., etc. But in terms of we're gonna rock up in a huge fleet of capitals and we're gonna destroy everything in our path, which doesn't happen enough nowadays, but it's bound to happen at some point again. It feels great. And by the way, I need to correct something in that was misinterpreted earlier. When I said renting is unavoidable, I didn't mean that every alliance is forced to rent. What I'm saying is, if you, in the current structure and the current way the game is structured and the income is structured in game, it's unavoidable that some alliances are going to rent, because that's it's kind of like power projection, or it's like time zone tanking. The rules are out there, people are going to do it, and if some alliances choose not to do it, then fantastic. But if you can, people are going to do it. This is EVE Online, and people are going to min-max the shit out of this game. So that's just the way
we were saying earlier about loss, right? Like, everybody will use every advantage they can use, whether that's to make ISK, whether that's to win a fight. Assuming it's legal, I'm not like advocating like cutting off people's internet or anything. But everyone's going to use every advantage they can, whether that's to win the economic war in terms of the amount of ISK, whether that's to win the combat war by spying on your enemies. It's the sandbox that's been created over the last 20 years, right?
Speaking, bringing those two questions together, somebody asked, what does Frat do with rental income, given as other alliances such as Init do not rent systems but are still able to provide very similar levels of services / SRP, etc. to members? And I know exactly who asked that question. He also asked it in chat right now. Golden, I see you, man.
So, I mean, obviously, we've already discussed SRP, right? We do a lot of things for, we just went for a whole process of, we'd like you to be in, faction dread. So, contract is your current dread. We'll cover the difference, and we'll give you the new dread, right? Like, so things like that. And it's just kind of initiatives to the alliance, or giving newer FCs handout fleets to just go and filament off somewhere and whelp it and destroy them, right? At the end of the day, the ISK is there in order to facilitate providing content for the members of our alliance, right? It's I mean, I look after a lot of the ISK, because I know how much it's sloshing around, right? It's not disappearing into the ether as a lot of people would seem to indicate that that's where Frat ISK goes. Majority of it's done to convert to that or to, award RFCs. We do a lot of like things like Plex awards to RFCs if they've done particularly large amounts of fleets, and that's kind of where it all goes.
Yeah,
Obviously, there's also a war chest that you build up, right? Like that's like every group ever would do. You still need your rainy day funds.
We were talking about this. You and I were talking about this in Iceland, and I don't assume this is a secret. But you were saying you actually have to go out and buy a lot of Plex a lot of times just to pay out people. It's like payroll, right? I mean, as an alliance leader, you do a lot of payroll duties.
Because we're quite open about it. If people are really contributing into the alliance, whether it's FCs or whatever, we will. If we can give you Plex, we'll give you Plex, basically.
Mm. We're coming up on the hour, so just maybe one or two additional questions. Luke, what's your thoughts on tie-dye? I mean, nobody likes tie-dye, right? But overall, good solution to the challenge.
I mean, you know what I do for a living, right? So
right.
I'm not secret about it. I work in the tech sector for a living, right? So I have my own views on it. I mean, tie-dye, don't get me wrong, tie-dye, when it's really bad, sucks, right? Like, it just does. Like, the whole 90 plus tie-dye, when you press a button, it takes like an hour to do something. It's terrible. Tie-dye up to 90%, actually, a lot of the time can be pretty good. I also think it makes some of the fights play out in interesting ways that they wouldn't have done, because everybody's sitting back and looking at what's going on because of this kind of slowdown of the system. So I think that's quite an interesting outcomes from a game perspective, right? There's no other game that generally allows a single shard of 6,000 people doing things simultaneously with the level of complexity that Eve has, right? Sure, there are other games and you could stick 6,000 people in like one thing and they could move around and they might be able to chat with each other, but they're not, cycling guns, calculating, angle of oscillate, calculating whether it's a wrecking shot versus a glancing shot. There's a lot of things going on there. So I think as a technical solution, it's probably the best you could really get to. It doesn't mean it doesn't suck at times when it's particularly bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Croda in chat is asking a follow-up question, and do you feel that the skills you've learned by leading a corp or alliance have benefited you in real life or enhanced your career? That's funny because that's the question that CCP always asks in the CSM interviews, I think.
Yeah, it is. I definitely think there are skills that translate from leading a corp or alliance to, whether that's leading a team in real life, right? Especially when it comes to the kind of new player side of like coaching people, right? And kind of not dealing with stupid questions, but dealing with questions that you hadn't really thought that someone would know. So yeah, I think it definitely does have value. What is quite interesting is, because the if you work in X, like I work in the tech space, generally surrounding me are fairly like-minded individuals, so it's a little bit of a bubble, and it's quite a little bit of an echo chamber. Whereas a corp in Eve, especially if you're over multiple time zones, is a very disparate group of different people with different opinions and different approaches to things. So it definitely gives you a lot more experience in kind of like the conflict resolution and kind of understanding different people do have different perspectives kind of side of management. I mean, you're in a similar senior kind of position in different things. Have you picked up similar sort of things from your community side of Eve? Kind of, if that makes sense. Does that work? Have you seen the same thing?
Yeah, it's so I'm very much in I manage a data company. So for me, it's I've always and I have a finance background. So for me, I always went into Eve building spreadsheets, building market models, and trying to make better sheets than the next guy in order to make money in Eve. So my work and Eve were always very much tied, because I was in my first years, I was a controller at work, and then I was building spreadsheets during the day, building better spreadsheets at night, I'm sure. Later on, nowadays, for me, it's much the streaming aspect and the talking about the game and the and that has given me a hugely new perspective on on the community, on the game development. I mean, we get to see, Luke, we get to see CCP from the inside when we travel to Iceland. I think it's given me a huge perspective on how that industry works, and it's been overall a very, very enriching experience. I don't know if it makes me if it enhances my career, but it definitely enhances my life, or me as a human being. It's a very overall an enriching environment.
So I guess the kind of streamer equivalent of the corp leadership question is: do you now? Obviously, we discussed each other's kind of occupations, right? So I kind of know
please. I'm doxed already in this community.
I mean, so it's fine. But do you think doing the streaming stuff and engaging with the Eve community, so kind of Eve adjacent, has given you a different insight when you're doing kind of things like presentations and stuff, and a little bit of a different insight at different levels of understanding and all the rest of it, based on the kind of the way you have to explain things on stream, not assuming not everybody has the same level of knowledge that you might not have realized if you were just going to do a statistics presentation. You kind of going to go, oh, everyone has the same knowledge base.
I think absolutely. I mean, the biggest change though is I work with a lot of people that work with Microsoft Excel, for example, on a daily basis, that I interact about Microsoft Excel. And what I do on my stream all week is explain to others what you can do with Microsoft Excel, even though I'm not the best. In the end, though, that hugely helps. But the biggest win is when I now hold large presentations, be it at FanFest or even being on TV at the Microsoft Excel World Championships. It's it's situations that you go through, that you learn from, and then everything else just seems kind of easy. So I think I'm in the very lucky situation of having done very interesting things in the Eve universe, and even being on TV and all of that, so that when I go to my day job, I don't feel like I don't have to prove myself every day, because I have something besides my day job where I feel like I've fulfilled a lot of my needs and my hopes and my dreams, if I want to be American about it. So that part of it is just awesome. I mean, just really great.
There is a white paper somebody did somewhere for their MBA, as like a dissertation for their MBA, regarding how an Eve exec of a corp and the skills they pick up are the equivalent of what you would learn during a Masters of Business Administration. So it's a really interesting document. I'm not entirely sure it's accurate, but
I'll tell you, I have an MBA. All right, I think I have learned. I think I've learned more in the last 20 years playing Eve than in my MBA career.
Well, it's a different story, right? But there's some interesting. There are some interesting. Interesting uses.
I mean, I still think at some point I'm going to quit my day job and do this full time, just because I love it, and even spending time with Eve, and this community and everything, it's just been I think more rewarding than a lot of things in my day job.
No, that's pretty cool. I mean, if you can make a career out of it, you go for it, right? I mean,
it's not as lucrative, right? It's not as lucrative as a day job, but it's a trade-off, right? I mean, it's I think it's a question of maybe how long can you do it, or how much do you do you want it, or even can you swing doing both half, I mean, I wish I was in 20 years ago when I started playing Eve. I was coming out of college. The world was very, very different for me in terms of how expensive is my life, how much time do I have, to now, where it's just very much so that you need to plan everything ahead.
It's an interesting one, right? I think we all have those moments where it's like, right, so here is my Eve life. be the alliance side of stuff, be the CSM side stuff, and then you've got your family life, and then your work life. And one of those kind of goes out of kilter all of a sudden and just knocks everything else because you're kind of squeezing too much in, sort of thing.
Yeah. Luke, two more things, and then I'll let you go. One thing is Futility just posted, you're both at the CSM and can't tell us what the null changes are that are coming, but I'm curious to know if Luke is excited for the changes, knowing what he knows. Luke, can you at least say, are you excited or not about it?
Yeah, I'm gonna steal Kazanir's line, actually, because he said this better than I would have done, which is everything that's being proposed has the potential of being amazing and being phenomenal. However, we've seen things that are great go horribly wrong at points. Now, I'm really excited about it. I actually think I'm genuinely really excited about it. And it has potential to be great. But like all things, you have to see what kind of comes out at the other end, right? And that's my slight level of trepidation. I'm not going to sit here and go, CCP are going to ruin it, because I don't think they will. But I don't think anybody's going to try and ruin anything. It's waiting to see what comes out the other end. But I'm really excited about it.
Certainly. And their CCP's track record, to be fair, over the last year or two has been quite good in terms of the expansions that they have done and the number of players they've gotten to come back. So, certainly, I am excited as well. I think there's a lot of content there and a lot of changes. So it's not going to be boring. That's for sure. It's not going to be boring.
Change is never boring, right? So
yeah, but sometimes some expansions I'm just like, like there's not enough for me, like not a lot for me here. But I think if LowSec is impacted in a large way, then that sort of impacts everyone, because if we hopefully see more wars, more production, more destruction, then that impacts almost every part of EVE. And Luke, the last thing I want to say is nobody in chat mentioned that we have the exact same picture on the wall.
No, they didn't. I mean, I'd noticed it.
I mean, like I didn't know. Luke noticed earlier. But how crazy is that? That's a Tiamat AT ship, and Luke has the same. But yours is slightly cooler. Is yours like the original, or is this a print?
No, it's not. No, mine is a print as well.
Okay.
This one was one from EVE Nottingham.
Okay.
It was one the week. There's a slight story behind it, and I was telling you about this earlier. There's a plaque that needs to go under it, because it was one the week before the last AT. And the quote that was given to me when I was giving to it was by Ithaca, was, "This is the only AT ship Fraternity is ever going to win." And so from the bottom of my heart, I thank Ithaca for jinxing it that Frat won the AT.
Yeah. That's that's amazing. And congratulations again. Although I'm sure you didn't fly in it, right?
Pilots and me that were in that team.
All right. Well, it looks like chat enjoyed the interview, so they say thank you, and I say thank you as well, Luke, for stopping by. It's been fun. Do come back sometime. Somebody asked earlier if you ever stream. You don't stream on Twitch, do you?
I don't stream. I will occasionally pop up on other people's stream. My real life does not afford me the time to stream on top of everything, unfortunately. I will stay in your Discord for a while. I won't just leave, so people can ask me questions. Just forgive me slightly slow responses.
Perfect. Yeah. So if you guys have questions for Luke, here's the Discord link to our Discord server. Actually, my bot has obviously killed itself and it's not working anymore. But you guys know the Discord. It's, if you're on Twitch, if you go below the stream, there's all the links there, and you can join the Discord there. And then if you want to ask Luke some questions, he's also Luke Anninan. On Discord. I mean, awesome.
Swift got it wrong during my CSM interview both times, so
yeah, Okay, Cool. Then thanks for stopping by, and we're gonna take a quick break. I'm gonna grab a beer, and then in 5 minutes I'll be back, and we'll do a little bit of market talk. All right.
Because Witchy's asking the question, it is a boa constrictor that's in the tank.
All right.
But
yeah,
she's asleep, so she's not going to be out.
next time on stream we'll take her out. All right. Bye guys. We'll be back in 5 minutes, and thanks, Luke. Bye bye.